Hello, my name is Brittany Kupo, and I just want to first congratulate you on Congresswoman Sewell, who's the first woman to ever serve in Congress for the state of Alabama. And I would also like to congratulate Congresswoman Coleman, the representative for this district, on being the first black woman to ever represent the state of New Jersey in Congress. So in your own words, could each of you describe what responsible voting is and why it's important in this upcoming election?
Yes. Well, let me start by saying it's a pleasure to be on the campus of Rider University and to be in the district of my dear friend Bonnie Watson Coleman. She has been a great addition to the Congress, and I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to tell her constituents and those here in New Jersey how lucky they are to have her as a representative. In terms of what I consider to be responsible voting, I think that it's so important that we are all civically engaged. I think that the cornerstone of our democracy is our civic engagement, and voting, it starts with voting. And I think that all citizens should exercise that sacred right of voting, and I think it's incumbent upon all citizens to be informed so that their voting is an informed decision. You know, I am especially glad to be on the campus of Rider University, so I have an opportunity to say firsthand to millennials how important it is that you all stay civically engaged. And I think every generation has its movements, every generation has its fights, and we're seeing that old battles have become new again when we think about the fact that we're looking to restore voting rights in 2016, or women's reproductive rights are still under threat in 2016. So I think it's important that every generation remains vigilant in their efforts to mobilize and be effective in their civic engagement, and it starts with voting.
Being informed is so vitally important, particularly now as the whole world is so complex, and even the issues that are confronting us domestically are so complex. And especially for young people who, as the Congresswoman said, did not live through the movement, really don't have any firsthand knowledge of the movements that got us to this point where women are now allowed to vote, minorities are allowed to vote. It is vitally important to recognize that the vote is a sacred opportunity that should not be squandered. It's very important to be informed. It's very important to understand your history, but it's also important to understand what is on the table here. And we had an opportunity in 2008, maybe you all didn't quite yet, but in 2008, we had the historic vote, voting for this young, energetic, brilliant man who happened to be African American, the first African American that we could vote for at this juncture. And we were all excited about that. Well, this election here coming up is even more consequential. The world has become more complex. The issues that have been avoided and deflected in Congress are much more sort of important to us personally. The rights of a woman, whether it's equal pay or reproductive rights, the rights of people to be able to vote, have access to unfettered voting, the environment, climate change, what does that mean? What is our impact on the climate? What about all of these sort of proposals to do things with energy? All of those issues really impact particularly your future, even more so than our future. And that's what's on the table now. So it is important that millennials pay attention to what issues are confronting them and what challenges are confronting them, but also recognizing the value of the vote. Because we understand that young people have not been happy with the status quo or not been happy with the quote unquote establishment. Many of them, happen to be on the side of issues that Senator Bernie Sanders articulated so valiantly. So the question now becomes, where do you go and what do you do? The one thing I can tell you is that this is not the time to do a protest vote. This is not the time to recognize that you just want your voice heard through voting for someone who will never, ever, under any circumstances, get elected. So you got to figure out what's important to you, what's important to your future, to your parents and your grandparents, and the generations that come after you. And then you need to cast a vote for one of the principal candidates from either side who will be the next president.
So how do you guys feel about Ryder's efforts to make voting more of a priority for students? Like we have voting registration and like there's a lot of activities going on lately. So how do you guys feel about that?
Well, I think that your hashtag Rider Votes is a great initiative. And it's because of that initiative that the Congresswoman and I are here today, because we really want to support registering students to vote and the importance of voting, period. Obviously, we represent a certain party, but you know, it's not about partisanship. I think that it's about making sure that everyone who is eligible to vote has that opportunity to vote. And so we're here to stress the importance of voting, irrespective of who you vote for. It's that important to all of us that you remain civically engaged and you mobilize the power within your community. And Rider University is a really great community. And so realizing and acknowledging that what's on the ballot is your future. What's on the ballot are issues that should matter most to you. Everything from college affordability to climate change to who you can marry, who you can, the discrimination that exists in the workplace, pay equity for women. I mean, so what's on the ballot are really your future, and you should have a stake in that and be as informed as you possibly can. So I thumbs up on hashtag Rider Votes, and we are both just so thrilled that that this university has acknowledged the importance of making sure that students have an avenue from which they can participate and make their views known.
I think that you can be very, very influential in connecting with the other colleges that you connect with, because yours is a movement here, but you're interacting with 900 other schools around the country. It is important, the role and leadership that you're taking here is going to energize the cohort of voters that we want to pay attention here. And so for me, being a part of this district, representing this district and having you all there, I'm very excited that Rider has taken on this very important issue and taken it on at a time where you can do something about it. So if you're not registered to vote right now, you still have time to register. And so to have this program at this stage, I think was just spot on.
Yeah. And I think the fact that it's your Unity Day celebration as well just reiterates the point that we want to make, which is that you vote. Not how you vote, but that you vote. And we want that vote to be informed. And I think that, I think that the social media generation, which you guys are in the heart of, is a very good way to get out the message. Your vote is your voice. That's how you voice your concerns, and that's how you also make your policy decisions known. And so who you vote for matters. That you vote matters. And being able to understand your generation's place on the spectrum of civic engagement. I think that I represent Alabama, and Selma, Alabama is not only my hometown, but I also represent it in Congress. And people died and fought for the right to vote, and your generation may not necessarily appreciate that, but it's incumbent upon us to remind you that the history of voting in this country is very sacred, and we should all be proud of that history, and we should be about continuing that legacy. And so what you're doing here today, and what Rider's doing to really get out the vote and get students registered is critically important.
All right, you mentioned that a vote is a voice of concern, but a lot of college students feel as if their one vote does not matter or won't make a difference in this upcoming election. So how do you guys respond to that statement?
Well, first of all, there's a history lesson here, and that is way back with a very, very popular President Kennedy, where when they averaged out his vote, when they analyzed his vote, he won by like one vote in every voting district in the country. So that was always sort of a symbol of how important that individual vote is. But your vote it is your individual vote, but you align with issues and other collaborations that support the same perspective on issues. So it's not just your one vote, it is the collective voice of those similarly situated that can impact this election in a very significant way. So you become one, but you become one of an army. You become one of a group that has established an interest and a stand, and you do impact where those electeds will move on those issues when your voice is heard.
I couldn't have said it better. And I think that when you put it in a historical context, you realize that the movements of the 60s, civil rights, voting rights movements, that they really stand as a history lesson of the importance of your single vote. Because what happens is, as a congresswoman said, it's a collective. If I've learned anything from studying the history of the civil rights and the voting rights movement, is that ordinary people, college people, students, can collectively band together to achieve extraordinary change. It was John Lewis and SNCC, the children of the students of the movement, frankly, from colleges that got together that really led the effort across that Edmund Pettus Bridge. And it was their personal sacrifice, the realization that collectively, while you may be singularly one person, collectively you can mobilize and really make a difference on an issue. No matter how old you are, no matter what your race is, that the fact is, this great democracy that we call America, it only works if we are all engaged. And there's no better way to show that engagement than voting.
You know, the interesting thing that represents to me also is that there's no other act you can engage in that makes you equal. Yeah. Makes you equal to the billionaire, makes you equal to the underemployed or unemployed. When you put your finger on that lever, you are equal to anybody else who does that.
And your vote matters. I mean, I think that we fight so hard to try to restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Some people say, well, why do you still need that? Well, you still need that because there are still barriers to accessing the ballot box. And when one person is denied the right, who is eligible to be a voter, one of those persons is denied that, it goes to the very heart of the integrity of that entire election process. And so we are not only about making sure millennials vote, but that everyone has the opportunity to vote. And we want that opportunity to be unimpeded. Right. And as elected officials, we shouldn't be afraid of how you vote. Because if we've done our job right and we've articulated the issues and we've put forth our case, then it's the best woman, let the best woman win. but I think that at the end of the day, it's about making sure that your issues are addressed. And so when I say mobilization, I don't necessarily mean that you have to lead a movement. But what I do mean is that you should organize your dorm to go out and vote that day. You should organize your church, your small groups of friends. I mean, I think that it's so important that you realize the power within, that you have the power to not only vote yourself, but get a group of friends to go and vote, on issues that you care about and really affect that change.
I'll ask the next question. Besides promoting voting rights, what else are each of you hoping to accomplish during your terms in Congress?
Well, I work on a number of women's issues. I work on a Healthy Moms Act, which is, protecting women who become pregnant and providing an opportunity for them to sign up for the appropriate health coverage. I do a lot of things on equal pay and fairness and paycheck and that kind of thing as it relates to women. I'm on Homeland Security, and so I've been working in that space as well and make sure that we are focusing our attention on not just targeting a certain ethnicities, but that we are aware of the impact of terrorism and where that terrorism can come from. That terrorism in Charleston, South Carolina, is different than that terrorism that is in Paris, or even perhaps last week or 2 weeks ago in New York and New Jersey. But we need to be dealing with those issues broadly. So I've worked on a number of issues regarding that as well. And also, even though we are moving in a very good direction in terms of jobs and opportunities and salaries, and that there are people who've been unemployed for a long period of time. And so I've been working in space that deals with the long-term unemployed. How do you protect their investments? How do you incentivize employers to employ them so that they can be gainfully employed. But I'll tell you what, there's no lack of issues to deal. We work on criminal justice reform, something that's vitally important in this society, and reentry legislation. So neither one of us is pigeonholed into any sort of area. We want to make sure that government appropriately does what it's supposed to do, and that there is equity and equality of opportunity for all people, irrespective of who they might be. And it's predicated upon their willingness to work hard and their educational opportunities.
I couldn't have said it better. I think that neither of us is a one-issue congressperson. I represent my home district, and my home district happens to be the poorest district in the state of Alabama. So one of my biggest issues is always workforce development and training, and making sure that my constituents are prepared for 21st century jobs. I sit on the House Financial Services Committee, and my background is financial, as a financial lawyer, and so professionally I'm sort of very tied into that. But I also start with the basics. I think financial literacy is critically important to the people that I represent, both for the banked and the unbanked. There's making sure that that information is accessible, making sure that predatory lending is not the pariah that it is, and making sure that my district has jobs and educational opportunities. When I think about what made the difference for me, it was education. So making sure that college affordability is there, making sure that folks are able to realize their full potential, irrespective of where they start in life, that the possibilities are endless. I also sit on the Intelligence Committee, and my area of focus has really been cybersecurity. I think that the threats to both the homeland and abroad are so pernicious these days. One doesn't have to come and wear a bomb to be destructive. One can actually try to get access into your computer networks and bring down our financial industry.
As we're seeing.
Or our power grids.
Yeah.
That we have to stay 5 steps ahead of the bad guys. And so another big area for me is our military. People in my district disproportionately join the military as a means of getting into the middle class, of getting an opportunity to travel and to get an education. So I really think it's critically important that we make the right investments in our military, that we give them the proper tools to do the mission that we send them off to do, and make sure that they can come home safely to their families. So, the issues are maybe localized in some ways, but really the effect that all these issues have, really is on all communities in America. So I think that from the international to the local, infrastructure improvements are critically important, and we're seeing that with Flint. But what happened in Flint could easily have happened in New Jersey or Alabama. In fact, I have similar water sewer issues in rural parts of my district. And so we have got to be good citizens, not only by voting, but by taking care of all Americans. I mean, I think all of us have a stake in this great country, and all of us should have an opportunity to achieve our full potential.
And I think that, life is aspirational. So we all aspire to be something more than we are, and we all aspire to be wealthy and whatever. But but our country runs on the middle class. I mean, it's really dependent upon what happens in that middle class, what happens with those small businesses, what happens with that union family, those working families. And we have a responsibility to pay attention and to not only take action against legislation that makes it more difficult for families to achieve and attain that sort of middle class opportunity, but also to protect it. And we need to be creative in ensuring that those opportunities exist. And as the Congresswoman said, this whole infrastructure issue, it is such a win-win for absolutely everybody, because we have crumbling infrastructure, and at the same time needing to fix the infrastructure creates great jobs. Creating great jobs gives spending money. Spending money means you create new businesses, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And so we recognize that we have a responsibility to look at our constituencies and see, why are you sending us there? And so how do we balance that which is necessary for them? And it really isn't that different than what's important to my constituents is important to her constituents as well.
Now, both of you mentioned that neither of you are a one-issue congresswoman. So why voting rights? What's your personal stake in promoting voting rights?
Listen, I'm a we're both beneficiaries of the Voting Rights Act and the Voting Rights Movement. I don't think that you can meet a woman elected official, an African American elected official, a minority elected official, without understanding the importance of the Voting Rights Act in leveling the playing field and giving voter equality to everyone, and what that does to empower a community to be able to elect people who have similar background as them and similar interests as them. That you don't understand how critically important that is, and every aspect of the community should be represented. When I think about my interests, it's not only to promote what's important to my constituency now, but because I represent Birmingham, Selma, Montgomery, the old civil rights district, I feel like it is incumbent upon me as a beneficiary to protect that legacy and to grow that legacy. That's why one of the bills that I'm very proud to support, which is trying to restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was really affected by the Shelby decision in 2013, now there's no pre-clearance. States and municipalities and localities that have had a history of voter discrimination can go unchecked. In fact, we should all be concerned that the 2016 presidential election will be the first time in my lifetime that we haven't had the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. And what does that mean? That means that you can see long lines, people can be directed to go to polling stations, and those polling stations change without notification. So I think that it affects all of our ability to make a difference. And so for me, it's very personal because I happen to represent the voting rights district. So protecting that legacy, extending that legacy is a personal concern for me.
And for me, it's a very personal commitment, and it's a very personal issue because I am both black and female. And there was a time when I would not have been able to vote on either one of those levels. But even more so than that, I've worked in the civil rights era field from the very beginning of my career. So I have seen what difference is made when you have certain elected officials as it relates to ensuring that you have the right laws that protect women, their rights on many levels, their access to opportunities, jobs. I mean, there was a time when you wouldn't have seen women in certain job categories, but for the changing of laws. And laws don't change if you don't have the right people there. They don't change for the purpose that you need them to change. And the same thing applies with minorities. I mean, from police profiling to educational opportunity to job opportunity, discrimination in housing. You can be, for the LGBT community, who you are, how you self-identify, who you can be married to, how you enjoy your life, how you can be treated in both public accommodations and other situations. All of those decisions, all of those factors are somehow related to a vote that was taken and a position that was taken by someone who was elected to office. So it's very personal to me to ensure that we're moving forward and that we're not allowing ourselves to be harnessed into taking us back, so to speak, or taking America back, or, which are all code words for me.
Last question. Do you have anything you want to say to the rider community?
Yes.
Vote.
Vote. Register to vote. Recognize that we're depending upon you, that we need you, and that we respect your opinion and your perspective, and we want you engaged. We need your ideas. We need your energy. But this country needs your vote.
It's a call to action. Every generation has its issues. We know that millennials have your own issues, and we want those issues to be debated, discussed in the open public arena. So we need your voices. We need your voices, and that's what your vote is. Your vote is your voice. So let your voice be heard by registering to vote, by taking souls to the polls, taking other folks, your friends, with you to go vote. So, my parting word is just the importance of voting. Never take for granted that we have this wonderful opportunity to engage in our in this really important civic duty that we have because of the sacrifices of so many. we wouldn't have the opportunities, you wouldn't have the opportunities that you enjoy today as students at this wonderful university if it wasn't for the someone else's fight, someone else's sacrifice. And so you owe it to that generation of people who provided you with those opportunities to pay it forward. And the best way you can pay it forward is making sure that your voice, your generation's issues are brought to the forefront. And what better advocates for those issues than you? And what better way to demonstrate that advocacy than voting?
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.